Tonight, we're going to talk about starting the recruiting process, the beginning stages of that recruiting process. And although it depends on the player and where they're at in their not only their timeline in high school, but also their game and their academics, I'm going to try to give you guys enough valuable information tonight to actually dig in so that we can actually apply it to you and your situation. Okay. So we're really going to be talking about those beginning stages of the recruiting process and also beginning that communication with coaches. So, what do emails look like? What do phone calls look like? And then how can we progress that conversation where it's more serious to campus visits, evaluations on the golf course, things like that. First things first, I want to break it down for you guys. I have a little cheat sheet here I'm going to be looking at. But there's three main stages of communication that we're going to be talking about tonight. The first is preparation stage. The second is the outreach stage. And the third is the exploratory stage. Okay. And preparation is more behind the scenes, what we can do now. So for those of you out there, the 2024s that are a little bit late bloomers, a little bit later in the game, you can start that preparation stage. For the 25s that are pretty good players, I think you can be starting that. And then anyone else, that's a 26 or beyond, you can be learning about what to do now that'll set you up for success later down the road. All right. So, and then I went through the preparation stage briefly there. That's more behind the scenes. The outreach stage is more of actively starting the paper trail, reaching out to coaches via email or meeting them in person, perhaps. In most cases, it's emails and phone calls. And then the exploratory phase, we're not going to touch on all of that tonight because our next webinar does cover campus visits, scholarship, and the kind of that final stage of recruiting. But we'll touch on a few things when it comes to when you can visit, how you can set those up, and the important things when it comes to organizing those with college coaches. All right, let's dive in. First stage is the preparation stage. So what does this really mean, right? We're beginning the process. You might be a late bloomer, senior, rising senior, just starting the process. I've spoken with a few of those this week even. You might be someone that's a really high performing eighth grader that just wants to know what this looks like in a year and a half from now for yourself. Regardless of your situation, I think it makes a lot of sense to first understand what I call your college preferences. So when I speak about college preferences, typically what I mean is athletically, what are you looking for, right? The coach dynamic, is the coach hands-on or hands-off? What sort of athletic environment are we talking about? Not only the stuff, right? The facilities, the buildings, the weight room, and some of the perks, right? I think we all latch onto those. Whether it's transportation, a lot of these teams are flying private now, or simply just, having a really nice locker room somewhere to put your feet up for 30 minutes a day in between classes. All of those things go into the athletic college preferences, right? And then academically, right? Does the school offer the major that I may be looking for? Does the school allow me to challenge myself if that's what I'm looking for? And just academically, is this the environment that I see myself doing well in and thriving in college? And then the third of, I call them 4 pillars, is the social preferences. And that's the big one that I think a lot of people miss. Social preferences are we talking about a big school or a small school? Are we talking about this a big community in the town or a smaller town, or maybe a more rural area? Is cold weather a deal breaker? That's a big one that even a lot of my Northerners bring to me. They don't want to play in the cold weather. But typically speaking, if you're considering higher academic schools, you might need to be a little bit more open to that. Quite interesting there. And then the third would be golf first or academics first. That's one of the big questions that I pinpoint quite often. And that's a tough one. A lot of people juggle with that. And there's some people that know exactly that they're going for academics, and some people that know that, hey, I'm not really trying to challenge myself too much academically. I want a good school, but it's not everything to me. They might be in that golf first arena. And then for the parents out there, I saw a couple that joined us at the top of the hour. Financially, what are we budgeting for college? What can we afford? And what makes sense? I think it's great to have those conversations up front. So the first thing in the preparation stage for me is understanding college preferences. What I do here at For College Golf is I take a college preferences worksheet, and it's about 35 questions, and I discuss them with each and every one of my players. And then through getting to know them, we also do a personalities test and a values-based assessment. We can start to marry their college preferences with where they're at in their game, and also where that we are on the recruiting calendar. That's a big one. A lot of people don't know, what is early, what is late. I'll try to define that tonight. It really does depend, but typically it's a domino effect, right? After June 15th, after sophomore year, that's when your biggest Power 5, schools are going to recruit. Your Florida States, Georgia Tech, right? All your Power 5 schools, Power 5 conference schools. And then typically it's a domino effect, right? Everyone else falls in line after that. But at the end of the day, I always say this, if it was just scores and grades for the top players, then I probably wouldn't have a job, right? So that's first thing is college preferences. Understand what you're looking for, understand what you want, and realize that this is a fluid process. You're not going to nail it down in 8th grade, and you're not going to, you're probably not going to have it super vague in senior year. It needs to be somewhere in between. And then as you go on campus visits, as you speak with coaches, I think you'll start to see where your best fits lie. And then the second thing in the preparation stage is crucial. Create a list of reach, target, and safety schools. Okay, what I mean by that is you're probably going to have about a third of your schools that you would have to perform better or even raise your grades academically in order to get that coach interested. Target schools that realistically we feel like we can play at, compete at, and get into academically right away. And then safety schools, not plan Bs, but schools that are slightly below your level of competence at the moment. And also academically schools that we're very confident that you can get into. And guys, I understand some of you are 8th graders, freshmen out there. You don't know academically where you fit yet. And I think that comes with time, right? That comes with the courses you choose, but it also comes with the grades that you get and the standardized tests that you take, right? So I always recommend, if you can, there's no downside to this, but if you can, try to take at least a practice test of the SAT or ACT in your 9th grade or 10th grade year. Therefore, you're ready when you go to take it. In the summer after 10th grade would be a great time to do it, or anytime in your 11th grade year. I do find that top level players that are, on the beginning end of that recruiting process, if they need the SAT, in most cases, they're going to need it by the beginning of their 11th grade year. So it makes sense to take it earlier rather than later. There's a lot of test optional schools out there, but I'll debunk the myth tonight. Just because there's test optional doesn't mean that you have to show it. So you can take it and choose not to show it. And just because they're test optional doesn't mean that they don't look at it. Okay, so keep that in mind. I know that was a big myth going around during COVID. Okay, once we create that list of reach, target, and safety schools, and by the way, an ideal size of that list, it's not 70 or 80 schools. And as we saw on last webinar last month, there's 1,100 schools that offer men's college golf. There's about 850 that offer women's college golf. So narrowing it down, even to ideally, we're thinking 25 to 40 schools is very difficult, right? I think it's easier than you think to get inside of like 100, 150, but narrowing it down even more to that 25 or 30 schools is really, really difficult. And that's where, someone like myself comes in to really ask the tough questions and do the research and start to uncover really where that individual's best fits lie. But if you guys can start researching early on, I'm also going to bring up a worksheet tonight called The Best Resources for College Golf. And I'll show you guys some academic search websites, some other sites that you can use to, even YouTube, right, to do a virtual campus tour. Some simple stuff that's really cool that I can show you guys. But ideally, we want to, after we finish the college preferences and we create that list of reach, target, and safety schools, we want to narrow that list down to about 25 or 30. And I've had really high academic, almost Ivy League type players that, they're really good really early, and their grades are incredible. I mean, I'm talking straight A's, 1500 or higher SAT, or 31, 32 or higher ACT. I think that's the equivalent. Those type players, you might only have a list of 12 or 15 schools right off the bat, and that's amazing. Because they know at the end of the day, if they need to go to a plan B, they probably can. They can probably get in anywhere. But that being said, you might have, I run into players all the time. They don't really know what they want yet. They're open to a lot of different places in the country. They're not picky about weather, and they're kind of middle of the road athletically and academically. Now that list, that is even more difficult to narrow down to a list of 40, because that player is not picky at all. They're open to everything, and their preferences really haven't narrowed down yet, and that's okay. Now, if you're a senior, you really want to try to expedite that process and narrow those preferences, because the clock is ticking. But as a late blooming junior, or even a high performing sophomore, I think you're totally fine leaving those preferences open, and then speaking with coaches, going on campus visits, asking friends questions, and starting to gather that information, and then make alter and change those preferences accordingly. Okay. Once we have that list, that's when part of my job begins, and that's to create what I call the marketing portfolio. There's many things that can go into the portfolio, but generally speaking, there's three big ones. There's the resume, there's the introduction letter, and then there's a swing video. We're going to talk about all three of those right now. All right, I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Brian, can you see that there? Awesome.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, guys, I'm going to show you a sample resume. One of my players from Texas. So we have a really nice headshot. This is her high school headshot. Phone number, email, Instagram account. You'd be surprised how much recruiting is going on behind the scenes in the direct messages, things like that on Instagram, at least starting the conversation. So that's a side note for tonight, but go follow all of your reach schools, all of your target schools, and even some of your safety schools if you can on Instagram. I like personal goals because it really shows, try to keep play Division I golf. I mean, I had a couple players that they showed me the resume. They told me they sent it to Division II schools before we started working together, and it literally said, "I want to play Division I golf" on there. So be really careful about that, and make sure that it's personifying what you're trying to get across to that college golf coach, right? In most cases, at the top level, you're going to start the conversation with the assistant coach, and even at the mid-major level, that's the case. At a James Madison, for example, where I'm at, or where I went, or in the state of Florida, just to give examples, like a Florida Atlantic or a Florida Gulf Coast or a Stetson, perhaps, right? But be really detailed with that personal goal, and know your audience, right? You're talking to college coaches here that are recruiting you to come in and be a mature, intentional team player, and I think really that personal goal is there to show what your Mount Everest goal is, right? Why are you pursuing this? Why is this something that you want to do and play college golf? I think that's a great place to explain that. So as you can see here, Mabry put in, what she might want to major in, what her end goal is, and that's go through law school. Some really, really high aspirations here, but I think it's great to put it out there. A little bit of personal information: home course, grad date, home address is kind of a 50-50. You don't have to include that, but if you see on the right hand column, definitely include your academics. And one thing I've started to do on these resumes is actually just include all the courses you've taken. So just looking at this, we can tell right away that she's a smart individual. She's taken high level courses, right? She's challenging herself with APs. And in her case, what we've done at the moment, she's still in the recruiting process now, we've actually added her senior year courses so they can see, she's looking at some high academic schools, so they can see exactly what she's taking next year and follow along as well. More for the admission side of things, but still. Coaches information, other honors. I think this is a big one. Coaches are just trying to see what you do in your spare time with your extracurriculars, and they're also trying to see where you've been honored and what you've accomplished in this section here. Okay, and then personal references. Personal references, they very rarely call those people, but I think it's cool to show who you're affiliated with or who you're friends with. It might be a head pro at your club. It might be, a high school coach. It might be someone else in your life that maybe mom and dad are super good friends with. Could be anyone. But the points of contact, usually that's someone like myself or a swing coach. And then definitely include a high school counselor or someone that has access to your grades, because in most cases, a lot of families don't know this, but in most cases, you cannot send your unofficial transcript to the school or to the NCAA. Your school has to do it themselves. So having something like that, just their email and contact information on the resume is very helpful for coaches. All right. And then as you can see, she's an excellent player, included all of her scores. We even highlighted the under par rounds in red. She's played a ton of great golf. And then very, very much underrated in the recruiting process is keeping coaches up to date on your upcoming tournaments. We'll talk a little bit about that when it comes to what questions to ask and a couple other things. I'm going to keep moving through this, guys. All right, next part of the marketing portfolio would be a swing video. And like I said earlier, this can be supplemented with a Florida Junior Tour TrackMan report, it's I wouldn't say spread yourself thin, don't be on Junior Golf Scoreboard on the Florida Junior Tour and have a video on YouTube, but probably pick one or two of those and you could be successful. I don't know if this video is going to load for us. Let's see. All right, I'll try to give you guys an example of that. Uh-oh. We are stuck.
While Mike looks into that, I think it's a good time to talk about, we do have at many of our FJTs, we have opportunities for players to go on TrackMan. We create some of what Mike is talking about in these videos with the TrackMan sessions. It will have the cameras on both face on and down the line. And as well as not just seeing their swing on video, it allows them to actually see the stats of what their golf shot is performing like. And so that is really a good tool that we are able to utilize to give to coaches, and it goes right on their FSGA profile. So the only people that can see them are those who are designated as college coaches on our website. So don't feel like you're giving away any information. That's just something that goes on their profile. And someone like the coaches at FSU, UF, they're all checked off. They check those things. So we have those opportunities. You'll see it on the tournament page for many of our FJTs and championships. We did it at both the boys and girls junior these last 2 weeks. So whenever you see those, that's a great opportunity to go ahead and do it. It's a free session. So whenever you see that and have the ability to, it's usually on the practice round day, the day before the tournament. Utilize that because it's a great way to have a very professional looking swing video on your account that you can use to also send to coaches.
Yeah, 100%. That's an incredible resource, Brian. And also just the fact that you're doing these things at tournaments, I think that impresses coaches and it shows them exactly how the young man or young woman is swinging, while they're competing in a tournament. So I wasn't able to pull up the swing video for some reason. If you guys want to look at a sample video, I have a ton of them, like 7 years of them on my YouTube page, and you can just find it at For College Golf. I tried to link the hyperlink to my desktop, and for some reason it wouldn't pull up. So instead, what I'll show you guys, this might even be better to learn tonight. I'll show you guys what's called, I call this a shot list. So I have players all over the world. I don't get the chance to see them at all times. And in many cases, they're taking their swing videos themselves, or their swing coach might be taking them for them. So this is what we ask for. And this is an ideal, start to a swing video. And when it comes to the swing video, I think most importantly is it needs to be professional. It doesn't need to be professionally done, but it needs to look professional, right? At the same time, like if you add music, or if you add an incredibly sharp camera, or something that would make it look like it's been done and paid for, I think that's a bit of a turnoff, actually. So an iPhone works just fine. Turn the iPhone landscape mode, so this way, and take the videos on a tripod. That's the best way to do it. And then a couple things here that we can just quickly touch on: pitching wedge, 7-iron, and driver. I should have put these in different orders, but full speed is by far the preference here. Slow-mo is nice. If you can do, 80% of the videos in full speed, that would be ideal. And slow-mo a little bit more when you're hitting irons, wedges, things like that. Full speed with driver, they want to hear the pop with the driver, right? They want to be able to hear speed. I think a lot of coaches have that trait and they can hear it. So having that as a, making sure that the driver's full speed and you get the full audio there is important. Face on and down the target line. So face on would be this view, and then down the target line would be this view. Make sure that alignment shaft, if you guys can see me in the picture here, make sure the alignment shaft is running perpendicular to the bottom of the screen. So it's pointing directly, it's in the middle of the screen, it's pointing directly at your target. And then make sure that you stand about halfway between the alignment stick and the ball, right? If that makes sense. So the ball is going to be a little bit outside the alignment stick and your feet are going to be a little bit outside the alignment stick. That way your body is always centered, because that's what we're trying to take videos of here, right? We're trying to show your mechanics of your body and also the golf club, right? And how you move it with different clubs throughout the bag. All right. And then once you take those full swing videos, it's really just about being creative, right? Show your strongest skill sets. That's what I'm a big believer of that. If someone's a really good putter, I want to show technique. I want to show their practice putting drills. I want to show everything that they're doing from that. So I've even had guys take, if you guys are familiar with a time lapse video, I've had guys do like an around the world drill in putting and actually take a time lapse and include that in their swing video. With short game, I think slow-mo videos are cool, but again, hearing the strike and being creative and showing a variety of shots is very good. Bunker shots, chip shots, pitch shots, short putts, long putts. Make sure there's a good variety. I think that's all I would really want to make sure of there. If someone sends me, one bunker video, one pitch, and one short putt, that's just not enough. But if you can show, a variety of clubs, a variety of different shots, and even, a couple angles, face on and down the line, that would be great. And I've even had some guys get creative. Like we've done bunker cams before. We put the cell phone in the face of the bunker and showed them hitting towards it. When I take videos of guys that I'm with in person, sometimes I'll go behind the flag and tell them to hit like a 20 or 30 yard pitching spinner. The really popular shot a lot of guys are working on these days, especially on the PGA Tour. Just to kind of show that ball coming in and show, how much spin it has on it, sort of thing. So just be creative and showcase your strengths when it comes to that. All right, and then I know a really popular one is the introduction letters. This is an A++ example of how a intro letter or an update letter should be written. Is that she includes why she's interested in the golf program. She includes why she's interested in the school. And she tells them a little bit about herself as well. I think those three things married together make a great email. Okay. And generally speaking, I think this is a super important thing that I would want all you guys to remember from tonight. Generally speaking, over the email, we're trying to provide as much information as possible. Detailed, specific, easy to digest, just information that makes sense. Right. And that could be anything from how your last tournament went to what you're looking for in a particular school. Right. There's a wide variety of topics that you could discuss there. And I have another worksheet that we can look at for that, called the email campaign, which is an update. It's either with my clients, what I do is I do a bi-weekly update, and they'll pick a topic on the email campaign worksheet, and then they'll actually write about it and update coaches bi-weekly, so every other week. But for the most part, I think when you're drafting an intro letter, make sure that there's some attracting factors there. We want to know why you're interested in the school. And if you know exactly why, make sure you say it. In most of the introduction letters I do, and this is not a popular thing, but in most of the intro letters that I do that I think have been pretty successful, we've shown a struggle and a success with the players that I've worked with. And really what it is, it's showing past tense struggle, right? Some adversity or an obstacle that you overcame in your life, or just telling a story about something that was really difficult for you. And then explaining present tense success, how you overcame that, how you're currently succeeding from that, if that makes sense. Okay, so always try to show a little bit of just being a real person, right? There's a lot of people out there that send emails that say, Coach, I'm a hard worker. No one will ever outwork me. I'm a great student, and this is why you should have me on your golf team, right? And selling yourself really isn't the way to do it. Now, if you're on a phone call, I would say that's different. You have the opportunity to really have a full conversation with a coach, with spoken words, right? Not just text and not just the formality of an email. But when you are doing those intro emails, also make sure that you attach your resume and make it easy for them. Put the upcoming schedule on the bottom. Also put it in bullet points in the body of the email, right? It sounds like double duty, but just make things easier for coaches, and that then you'll, in essence, make things easier for yourself in the recruiting process. Okay. So that's the outreach stage, guys. Once you send those initial emails, that's when the personalized strategy begins on my side of things, right? It really depends on where you are. If you're a high-performing sophomore, you might have reached out even before June 15th with some of these emails. You are allowed to do that, by the way. So the 2026s that are listening, you can reach out next May and send your introduction letters. And I would actually recommend doing that, because then you get ahead of everyone, and it's a bit of an advantage in the recruiting process, especially if you're a player that's top 200, top 300 in their class. Right? If you're outside of that, you can wait a little bit, because typically even those mid-major schools don't recruit and at least have verbal commitments until that following March. So you have a little bit of time. But when it comes to the initial stages of speaking with coaches, a lot of times what I see is about a 25 to 30% response rate, which is fairly low. A lot of people are shocked by that. But if you think about emails in today's world, it doesn't mean they didn't read it, and that doesn't mean that they're not interested, that they're uninterested. Okay, that's what that's one of the biggest pieces of my job, I think, is explaining to people that just because they haven't responded in 24 hours, right? A lot of times we want to wait 6, 7, 8 days for coaches to respond. I mean, I had coaches at the beginning of the summer that were at the German girls and the German boys overseas, and they literally didn't have access to their email. They probably had it on their phone, but they weren't really checking it, right? So sometimes these coaches go out of the country, sometimes they're out of pocket for weeks at a time, especially with family vacations and things like that too, this time of year. But these coaches really, and it's hard for me to say what's going on in the coaching world right now. Some coaches are on family vacations, some coaches are on the road recruiting very much, day in and day out, week to week. But keep in mind, in Division I, coaches only have 40 recruiting days, so they have to use those wisely. And men's college coaches cannot recruit on the road in December unless it's the AJGA Senior Showcase. Okay, that doesn't mean you shouldn't play in December, but that means just be aware of that and try to get the communication in beforehand or shortly after that. When coaches do reply to that initial email, there's many ways you can go. First thing is to make sure that you're replying in due fashion, let's say, within 3 or 4 days, I would say, as a general rule. And you don't have to respond right away. Do not feel rushed to respond to these coaches, unless it's March of your senior year and you have 2 offers already and you have a third coach that's interested, right? That would be like the only scenario where I would say probably need to get on it and stay on the ball with that. But as they respond, what I very much typically hear from coaches is, keep me updated, keep me posted with your results. Let me know. Can you give me an update at the end of the summer? Okay. And very simply, I think as junior golfers and as parents of junior golfers, we just want to specify, what does keep me updated mean? Does that mean call them every other week? Does that mean email them with a paragraph of information? Just ask and clarify that with each coach. Even if it's over email, you can ask that. And I think that's a really good rule of thumb. Another thing that I hear very commonly is, can you please fill out our questionnaire? I would recommend filling out all the team questionnaires on your list, especially those at the top, the reach schools, and even some of the target schools as well. The safety schools, yes, I think it's important, but at the end of the day, the safety schools will most likely recruit later, and you can do that in a month or 2 months from now, when in reality, some of your reach schools might be recruiting right away. And in order for you to make an impression on them and for them to actually log your personal information in their system, it makes sense to fill out their questionnaire. There's a service called Recruit Spot that does questionnaires now. And essentially, it's basically like, if any of you have older siblings, like the Common App for college admissions. You put in all your personal information, and then it just repopulates it for the next questionnaire. So it's a nice help. You only have to do that once, and then each school and each coach has their own specific personalized questions that they will ask, like why Florida State? What attracts you to our program? Or tell me your top 3 greatest golf moments in your career. You pretty random, pretty off the wall stuff I see all the time in these questionnaires. But make sure if they request you to fill that out, make sure that's something you do even before you respond to that initial email. Okay. And by the way, I think I want to give the right impression here. Initial emails are a starting point, right? And it's a necessity. I always say it makes sense to start the paper trail, but as soon as you get a response from a coach, right, that's kind of like a nod or a bit of a nudge to say, okay, I am willing to engage with you, right? And that's when it's your job to start asking good questions, trying to set up phone calls, and take the next step with that school. So real quickly, I think the big ones are fill out the questionnaires, respond to the emails, even though we talked about a 20 or 30% response rate, set up the follow-up calls when they get back to you. One thing I like to talk about when it comes to setting up those follow-up calls is give them what I call a Chinese menu. And what I mean by that is give them a ton of options of when you can speak, and give them an opportunity for them to choose when the best time for them to respond to you is. So for example, Coach, do you think it would make sense to set up a phone call next week? I'm available Tuesday from 1 to 4, Wednesday from 3 to 6, and Thursday anytime after 7 p.m. Okay, that would be a Chinese menu, an example of that. That's a really, really good habit to get into, especially when you're responding over emails and things are so formal. Once you start texting a coach, I think that's the kind of the next step here is when you ask for either the coach provides their cell number, which they will do at the bottom of the email in some cases, or they might reach out to you first in some cases. But text them, and if you start on that sort of relationship, if you get going on and start that texting relationship, I think that's when you can then start to make the conversation a bit less formal and start to get to know them as a person. I'm not saying that it needs to be buttoned up from the beginning and all the way through, but what I am saying is I think early on, before that you've really gotten to know that coach and kind of know where their head's at and what their recruiting timeline's looking like and really their interest level in you, I think it makes sense to keep things super formal. Don't say yo coach or hey coach. Make sure that if you are sending a text that it still looks like an email, right? Include your name, your recruiting class at the bottom, your email even. You can easily go into, if you're an Apple user, it's called text replacement and create a shortcut for yourself and a little signature. That way you can add it to every email, every text, everything that you send to coaches. Okay. Another thing that's probably, it's super beneficial, but it's less commonly discussed is how to log coaches' contacts in your phone. I get a lot of guys that get random numbers calling and they're like, I don't know that number. I'm not picking up. Or I didn't recognize who that was. And at the end of the day, it was a coach trying to leave them a voicemail. So make sure that your voice message isn't from when you were 11 or 12 years old. I get a lot of guys that haven't said it in quite a while, which is pretty hilarious. They sound like different people. So it's important to, sound like yourself. And then also when a coach does call you or you call a coach, make sure you log their number and even put the division, the conference, and anything else in the notes or the company section of that contact, so that when you re-engage in conversation with that coach, you can be reminded of those things. Okay, maybe the city that the school's in. I think sometimes that's important, especially if it's a lesser known city. So that's setting up the calls and getting more used to and being more functional with the recruiting process. Then the two big things that we talk about after that stage are on-course recruiting and campus visits. Okay, and as we're ending this outreach stage, we're going to kind of begin that exploratory or the exploration stage. All right, so when it comes to on-course recruiting, it's summertime. You guys have probably all seen college coaches out watching you. I think the biggest thing, the most underrated thing, if you aren't in the middle of your round and you see a coach, whether you know his or her name or not, go up, introduce yourself, look them in the eye, shake their hand, and just thank them for being there today. Super underrated, right? And when they come watch you, they're not looking for you to shoot 65, right? Everyone knows that that's not realistic. Right? Any good college coach knows that that's not going to be a normal or average day. In fact, I've had many coaches tell me over the years that they'd actually rather see a player struggle on that day to see how they react, see how they deal with adversity, see how they are under pressure, rather than someone that plays great. So keep that in mind as well. They're looking at how you deal with adversity, what happens after a bad hole, how you treat your playing partners, how you treat your parents. And then Brian and I were talking about this before everybody came on tonight, but how you show up to the first tee and how you shake the starter's hand. Right, I'm sure you see it all the time. Don't need to chime in, but there's guys that come 2 minutes before their tee time, shirt's not tucked in, ball hasn't been marked yet. They don't even have a coin or a tee in their pocket, and they're just running to the first tee to grab their scorecard and go. College coaches notice that. They also notice what time you get there and warm up. Big advice here, actually. If you know a college coach is coming to watch you on a certain day, meet them in the parking lot, kind of address that elephant in the room and just shake their hand right away. They're going to be there at least an hour before your tee time in most cases. College coaches don't show up like some mom and dads. College coaches don't show up on the first or second tee box. They show up early. They'll be on the range in most cases. And that advice goes to you guys as well, starting the recruiting process and perhaps going and watching college golf events. Make sure you show up early enough, even get there before the team hits the range. That'll go a long way, and that'll impress a college coach. So that's pretty much the gist of on-course recruiting. Guys, if there's any additional questions there, I'd be happy to specify, but I want to make use of our time here. When it comes to campus visits, I think the biggest thing that you guys need to know, typically, we're talking unofficial and official visits. Neither can happen with a college coach present until August 1st of your junior year or after your sophomore year summer. You can go visit a college campus at any time on your own, but unofficial or official visits cannot happen until August 1st of your junior year. And in most cases, official visits are only set up by the coach. You're not, in most cases, you won't be asking, Coach, can I take an official visit, right? Because that means you're asking for them to essentially pay for your travel. A lot of times that is extended to the prospective student athlete, not asked. But when you are taking campus visits and you've set up a time and a place to meet with the coach, make sure you set up the agenda too. Ask them, Coach, what should we plan on doing while I'm on campus? And then give them a few things that you want to see, right? It might come off as like it's sounding picky, but I don't think it is. I think it shows that you do your research, or that you've done your research, I should say. Coach, I'd love to see the Brickman golf facility. I would also love to see the business building. And if it's possible, I'd like to meet a few players on the team and poke my head into one of the dining halls and have a meal. I think that's totally reasonable. If you come to them with that sort of preference or agenda and ask them, Coach, what else are we doing during that day? I'd just like to be prepared and understand how long we're going to be on campus. I think that what that does is it helps set an understanding of what's going to go on in the visit, sets the agenda, as I say, and it gives everyone a clear picture of what's going to happen. And it really just eliminates a lot of that confusion and nervousness and all those other things that tend to pop up during campus visits. All right, I'm going to show you guys one more worksheet that I skipped over here that I think is really, really good. All right, I use this with all of my players. I don't think there's been a single player in the last 5 years that I haven't used this worksheet with. So listen up, this is a really good one. This is a worksheet that, or just a material that provides applicable questions to coaches. And at the bottom of this worksheet, you'll also see there's questions that you can ask their players or current players on the team. And then there's questions that we should expect that coaches are going to ask you, which I think is just as important. And then if you notice, we talked about the 3 pillars of college preferences. They're the same here, right? So I'm big on, when it comes to those college preferences, I'm big on asking questions about, like, under the athletic umbrella here, we talk about coaching, recruiting, facilities, practice, qualifying. So just going to bring up an example here. What in practice, what does a typical daily schedule look like for a student athlete on this team? So what does the whole day look like for the student athlete? Or, hey coach, how are practices structured at so-and-so university? That'll give you a really good look to get a feeling if that coach is super hands-on, or if that coach is more individualistic and lets each player kind of do their thing. And I think it's really important to uncover these things and understand them before you jump and make a final decision to schools. There's a stat out there. I think it's, if you get a lesson from your swing coach once a week for your entire high school career, like 52 weeks times 4 years, that's that's about 208 hours of instruction, right? And you'll probably talk to them a little bit outside of that as well. But you will spend over 200 hours with your college coach within the first few weeks. Think about that. So making sure, and I'm not saying the biggest part of your college decision is the college coach, because college coaches move all the time. In fact, there was 54 Division I men's coaches that moved last year. This year, it's much less. This year, I've been calling it the year of assistant coaches. There's about 50 assistant coaches that have moved and changed places. It's all an interconnected spider web, as I say. But the college coach is someone you're going to spend an incredible amount of time with. And at the end of the day, they are the person organizing team activities and the person making decisions. And sometimes, picking the guys on who's going to go and who's going to stay home for that given week. So not to get too serious there, but it's important to get to know, who you're speaking with and ask good questions. And then from an academic standpoint, I think, do most players find this university challenging from an academic standpoint? Obviously, if you're an Ivy League recruit, you shouldn't be asking that. I think that's kind of a silly question. But if you're someone who's more middle of the road or even higher academic, I think that makes sense. How would you characterize the academic environment at blank university? What are the most common majors? Sometimes you can find those majors on the actual team page, but I think it's important to ask these questions regardless. And then, like we talked about just for a second earlier today in the webinar, the social side of campus. Ask coaches and ask players, what's the most interesting thing about James Madison University? What's the most interesting thing about Florida Atlantic? What's the best thing about the campus culture or environment? These are really, really good ones. And then as these go on, I can send this to you guys, all those that put their email in the chat. But these are the more general, more broad questions, and then they actually get more specific within each section as they go on. So I've worked pretty hard on this, and this is something that I think will be really good use for you guys going forward in the recruiting process. Questions to expect from college coaches. This is always a good one, and I think people think this is quite interesting and helpful. So let's go into it. What are you looking for in your college experience? That's probably the most general, most broad one, but it's the easiest ones for coaches to ask. So in a perfect world, I would bring that up before coaches can even ask. But if they do sit you down in their office at the end of the visit, let's say, and you haven't addressed that yet, make sure you're ready for that. Make sure you can articulate to them what you're looking for, or at least what you've uncovered so far, right? I don't know is an acceptable answer if you have an understanding of what you have seen and where you have put your boots on the ground and your understanding of what you're looking for. So just to be clear, I don't know, I think is an acceptable answer, but you should have something to back that up and give them a little bit more substance or detail from there. Where are you in the college recruiting process currently? I think that's one that catches a lot of guys and girls off guard. Um, for me, you are more than welcome, and I actually propose it to a lot of my guys and girls. You should be sharing the other schools that you're speaking with, or at least generally tell them, I'm going on a few campus visits. I'm speaking with a few coaches next week. Create some leverage for yourself. If you're already doing these things, make sure that other coaches are aware of that. But you do not need to feel the urge, or in most cases, I don't even think it's appropriate to discuss what other scholarship offers you've gotten, or how the coach approached you in the first place. I don't think you need to get into that detail. They're trying to understand, in your decision-making process, where are you? Do you have 3 offers on the table already? Are you planning on being done by next week? Or are you still in the beginning stages and still considering taking 2, 3, 4 more months and then making your college decision? So, and again, sometimes we don't know. So that's I think something that's really personal to everyone and is up for interpretation depending on the time or where you're at, and even the given week. People ask me all the time, like, Mike, do you have a list of schools that are still recruiting? I probably have a decent idea of who is and who isn't, but to actually have a list is literally impossible. That's how quick recruiting changes, right? I mean, just from the time we started today's phone call, I bet you 2 or 3 of my guys, even just the 35 players that I have probably communicated with coaches and something has happened. So that's kind of what my job is, right? I'm always on my toes. I'm always talking about recruiting strategy and next steps and things like that. So when a coach asks you, like, where are you currently in the process, just be honest with them, shoot them straight, tell them where you're at, and don't be afraid to tell them what other schools are recruiting if they ask. Okay. What is your intended major? I think if you are maybe one of the more opinion, if you know what you want to major in, tell them, and make sure in advance that school has it, right? You wouldn't want to say engineering and then figure out that school actually doesn't offer engineering, or something simple like history and the school doesn't offer a major in history. Do your homework. That's another thing that we didn't really touch on too much tonight, but do your homework. Make sure that you're looking up team rosters, coach bios, understanding where they practice in their facilities, doing virtual campus tours on YouTube. There's so many things you can be doing on top of just looking at the undergraduate majors and things like that to learn more about the program. And guys, I mentioned this earlier. I just want to finish tonight by saying that when we are beginning the recruiting process, these emails are to inform coaches. And then when we pick up the phone, we are there to gather information. And the best way to gather information is to ask questions. But to make sure that you are equipped and ready to ask those questions. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be a brainiac. You just have to be curious and interested in that school. And that's the same advice I give players when they're going on a phone call as they're going on to a campus visit, right? The campus visit's more walking around campus, more physical. You're seeing the stuff, you're seeing the buildings, you're actually meeting people in person. But over the phone, there's so much that can be discussed just from the comfort of your own home, speaking with the coach. And there's so much online that we can research, right? Like, I think asking coach, like, scoring averages of players on the team, that's something you should know already. The size of the team, you should know that, right? That's easily accessible information. Even the practice facilities, in most cases, you should know the name of it, right? And then make sure that you're looking at the coach's bio and understanding where they've been, if they're brand new to the school or if they've been there for 30 years, right? There's a wide variety of experience in the world of college coaching as well. But next webinar, we're going to go more into the exploratory phase. And what I mean by that is, when you're speaking to a college coach and progressing the conversation, what does that look like? What does that sound like? How do we do it? Right. And then also, when you get your boots on campus, when you actually take those campus visits, how to make those super successful. And we're going to hit on some commonly asked questions, how to dress, what mom and dad should do, and just really the things that make sense, like admission tours, seeing the golf facilities and then meeting the team if you can, especially if the school is in session. So, Brian, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for coming out tonight, and we can do a little Q&A with our remaining 5 minutes here.
Yeah, if anyone would like to ask any questions to Mike, feel free to unmute yourself. If you're not comfortable asking a question, it might be a little personal. We do have our form on our website on the Path to College Golf page. You can always use that to submit any questions. They go directly to our collegegolf@fsga.org email, and I relay those to Mike, and they also give us an idea of what people want to hear in these future seminars. So feel free to come forward either now and ask a question or use that resource to your benefit. But feel free, everyone's on mute. Feel free to go ahead and unmute yourself if you have something you'd like to ask tonight.